Good evening, everybody. Please rise for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty, and justice for all. Good evening, everybody. I think the first item I have on the agenda is our correspondence. Let's see. We have one letter from a resident regarding the tax break. And then the next item is a report from the superintendent of schools. Ed.
So for tonight, we are focusing on our budget presentation. We have a couple of items to go over with the board and with the community. I'm just going to go over to the podium so we can start the presentation. Is this working? Can you hear it? Great. All right, so good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the Board of Ed and people in the community, those who are here and those who are at home watching. Tonight, we are presenting the revenue side of the budget. Normally, in this presentation, we would do the revenue and the expenditures and then present a full budget. But we're facing some challenges, and we wanted to talk about it with the Board of Education. So we're going to present a portion of the budget, and then we're going to present a portion of the budget in future meetings. What I guess I wanted to say, just to kick this off, is almost all of the people in the back of the room and myself and a lot of the people in the room got into the role of education because we care about kids and children, and we wanted to do our very best. It's a great honor to be the superintendent of the school district. And when I took my first day here, I had to take an oath to protect and to serve, and it's really something I take very seriously. We are facing a budget challenge that we need to discuss, that is going to be difficult, and I'm going to explain it in the best way I know how, in the most sincere way I know how, and then also what we're doing to kind of address it, because we can get through it with what I hope is the most minimal effect on our children and our students and our programs and our staff as we possibly can. So I'm just going to jump into it and tell the story. Our projected 25-26 total budget revenue is $105,676,793. That is a projected revenue decrease from this year. And I'm going to explain why, even though we're going to be raising or asking to raise 2.2% 03 a tax levy, which is an increase of 1.4 million, how it's possible that we're actually going to have less money next year to work with than we will this year by $351,000. The story of a budget has two parts to it. It's the revenue, the amount of money you take in, and then that's the only money you can use and should use to run your district, the expenditures. So there's just two sides to that. To make it as like base as possible, if I had a salary of $100,000 and I'm an individual, that's my salary. That's what I use to live. I pay my rent, I pay my utilities, I pay for transportation, whatever I do as an individual. I know that I have to have under $100,000 to spend that year to survive as an individual. So the equivalent of what's happening here is, and it's a minor difference, is if at the end of the year your boss said to you, okay, next year you're not going to get $100,000, you're going to get $97,000. And you say, okay, I have to plan accordingly. The only way to deal with that is to spend less, and then you're good. But if at the same time you get that $3,000 decrease, and at the same time you have an increase in rent, and an increase in gas bills, and an increase in electric bills, and an increase in all those other costs, it's actually more and more challenging to spend less and to get through. And I think that is the story of an individual, which could be applied to a larger sense. Instead of $100,000, we're talking about $100 million and how it is affecting a school district. It's a small percentage decrease. It's 0.33%, but it is still a decrease while costs are going up. So I'm going to show each part of that, the why, and then our assistant superintendent of business, Ms. Messerol, is kind of going to get into the numbers in great detail to show the why and the how, and then we're going to talk about what we want to do about it. So the total major revenue category, this is our reductions year over year, is about $1.9 million in reductions, and that has a number of factors, and any one of these factors that are up here we could handle. some of which we knew about and could prepare for, some of which we did not know about until recently and could not prepare for. The state aid decrease of $597,000. We were thrilled a month ago to get the news from the governor that they were going to fully fund our foundation aid and in fact give a 2% increase. So in my mind, I was like, this is good news and we're going to have more money. And Rhonda will explain when you look at it's not the foundation aid we're talking about, it's the expenditure aid that we got less money than what was calculated. And she'll explain how that is and why. But at the end of the day, it's still $600,000 less revenue than the year before from state aid. We have something called pilot payments in the district. And the Bristol is a senior living center that pays a pilot payments in lieu of taxes. That agreement was made when they built the place years ago. They were paying us almost $800,000 a year in pilot payments, and that was a revenue. And Ms. Messerol, when she was looking at the incoming money from taxes, noticed about a month ago that the amount coming in from the Bristol wasn't going to add up to the 800,000 or the 700 and some thousand that it normally does. So she called the county to say, this is odd. The money coming in this year is less than what we're used to getting. And the county basically told her, oh, they grieved their taxes and they were awarded a 400 and some $1,000 decrease in their pilot payments to you. So nobody told us about it on the first thing. Two, it's affecting us this year because that was money we counted on that was part of our budget last year that suddenly isn't coming to us. So that's less money that we actually have this year for operating costs. But more importantly, it's money we don't have next year that was once revenue. And again, we can handle some of these things when they come our way, but not all of these things. Interest is pretty basic. The interest rates are just a little bit lower. So we're getting a little bit less interest from our money that sits in the bank. The other thing that happened was tuition decreases. We had a number of students who were coming to the district last year from other districts for special education programs. We have some really great special education programs that we're proud of. And other districts would pay us to send their kids here. But what other districts were facing as their budgets got tight is that it was not a cost-effective way to run their district. So they started building their programs in-house and less students are coming to our district for those programs. So that is a decrease in our revenue of $350,000, not only for next year, but also something that hit us this year as well, but we didn't account for it because we had that revenue in the years past. The one we did know about and we're planning for was the appropriated committed fund balance decrease of $434,000. That one was a payment that we make from a reserve every year. Basically, there was a settlement about 5 or 6 years ago where the district got over $1 million+ from a healthcare settlement, money they hadn't been given that they were owed. So at the time, the Board of Education and the superintendent put it into a reserve and made an agreement to spend a certain amount from that reserve each year to help reduce taxes for the taxpayers, which was a good plan for those 4 years or 5 years. But we're at a point when we knew this, we were planning for this, where that was being decreased this year. That doesn't exist anymore. So we have to absorb that cost in the year that it disappears. We were ready for that one. And we were kind of planning on the tuition one, but we were completely taken aback by the pilots and taken aback by the state aid outcome when we realized the projected versus the actuals did not match up. So that comes to $1.9 million of less revenue. The reason that we're kind of not losing all that money is because we take in $1.4 million in tax revenue. So the difference between that 1.4 and the 1.9 is the $350,000 less revenue. In most years, in a typical year, when you have a 2% tax cap, you get about $2 million more. And it sounds like a lot, but percentage-wise, it's about 2% more. And that's what you use for your increased expenses. But in this year, we're in a unique situation as a result of this, that we're not getting that increase, and it makes it harder to meet the expenses that are going up. So while we were planning our budget and kind of putting everything together without really any additions, we looked at our budget and it was about $109,960,000. We knew that when we plan a budget like that, you have to pull back. So you put in the things you want. We talked just 3 weeks ago about coaches. We talked about armed guards. We talked about elementary world language program. We talked about pre-K. We talked about a number of things that we wanted to have in our budget. And so that was the 109 when we added all those things in. And our target has to be 105. So when you look at that, you say, wow, we are $4,283,207 over where we need to be come in under the tax cap. So we have to get to work cutting some of the things that we wanted to do that that we can't do. What were the things, though, on the expense side that also go up? So at the same time that revenue is going down, expenses are going up. So, like for example, BOCE's administrative and program fees are often increasing 5, 6, and 7%, even though our revenue is not increasing. Contractual obligations are pretty much around 2%, and we do that with intent because we know in a typical year when we get 2%, we're able to cover those contractual obligations in a typical school year when you have that $2 million revenue coming in from that 2% increase. Cost of living increases, utilities, electric, heat, gas, water, all is up. In some cases, 10, 17%. And each one is different. But just like you are facing at home, I know about you, but my electric bill is probably $300 more on average than it was 5 or 6 years ago. It just keeps going up, and we have to pay those bills. That's one of the reasons why we're doing the solar project, because we want to recoup that money in future years, and that'll be up and running. Unfortunately, not this year, but hopefully next year. Regular insurance. We have insurance in the district just for like if someone trips and falls on our property, we have insurance that covers us for that. That rate, I think Rhonda's going to talk about, went up 28% to the tune of $180,000 increase just for the regular insurance. And I think you might be seeing that as well, that your home insurance rates are going up because of all the catastrophes around the country. These companies are raising their rates to make do for the payments they're making in other places. And transportation. We knew transportation was going to go up. We have benefited for years because we had a 5-year contract right after COVID. Other districts were getting hit. We were kind of protected by our 5-year contract. We knew that there was going to be an increase. We were hoping it would be about 20%. It looks like it was more like 28%. But Rhonda or Ms. Masserole will speak to that specifically when she goes over the transportation budget. So, and then that also, we want to add armed perimeter guards to the budget. And I want to speak to that a little bit. Our original plan was 6. There's just no way that I can fathom how we can fit that in. I would like to propose that we go with 3 for the cost of approximately $200,000. And when I say that, they're armed perimeter guards. They're not in the buildings. And the goal is to reduce response time. It's not perfect. It's not exactly the way we would have drawn it up, but it provides some level of comfort to our community. I want to say, having witnessed and collected all of the data from the armed guard or the security forum, and then also going to PTA meetings and talking to parents, there's certainly a group of parents that are not in favor of armed guards. But I can tell you with great certainty that the large majority of the community parents that I speak to are in favor of it. And I do worry that if we don't have armed guards in our budget, it could risk whether it passing, actually. So I'm just putting that out there, and I think this is an important thing to consider. But all of these things are increases, and there's just no way of getting around it. There's not like I think it's an increase, it might be an increase. These are factual pieces of information I'm giving you. They're increases. So again, revenue is down, costs are up, and we need to meet this challenge. So here are line items that I've currently removed from the budget in order to get us down. The principals and I meet every year and we talk about wish list items. Principals are very creative and they care about our kids just as I do, and they want to create cool spaces for learning. And we had a lot of those planned and all those came out. So special projects, wish list items are all out of this year's budget. All new equipment and additional buildings and grounds projects are out of this year's budget. That means, we were going to pave a couple of spots. We were going to get a new lawnmower. We're going to have to push that. You can push that 1 year and you can be okay. But if you keep doing that, you run the risk of your buildings and grounds in your plant getting in disarray. So we don't want to do this year after year. We want to do this maybe one time and then correct it in the future. But for now, all new equipment and additional buildings and grounds projects are on hold. We're going to be cutting 2 administrative positions from this budget. One central office administrative position was vacated in August, the assistant superintendent for human resources, and we've kind of reconfigured our central office without that position, and we had intended, because we heard the community loud and clear in the past, to cut that central office administrator from our budget. We're also, and I really say this with a heavy heart, going to be cutting our 1 elementary assistant principal at Lincoln Avenue. There is no way we can afford to keep that in our budget. We still maintain 3 principals in each building, but I do know that that principal is very well supported and cared for by both staff, students, and families. And if there's anything in this that makes me really sick inside, it's that one. All curriculum work that's paid will be postponed next year. Our assistant superintendent for curriculum will find creative ways to work with teachers during preps, during team meeting times, during grade level meetings, and or department and or faculty meeting time to do curriculum work. That includes all professional development. We have brought some really great trainers in from the outside, but the truth of the matter is we have some really great trainers who work here every day. Our teachers, our administrators, Ms. DiMiola, will work together to build our professional development creatively from inside. So all of that will be on hold, and conferences outside of the district. We will be reducing 4 sections of elementary school classes, 3 in second grade and 1 in first grade. Those class sizes currently sit around 15 students, maybe 14, 15. And while that's a lovely thing to have, we cannot in this situation maintain it. The class sizes will go to about an average of 23 in the first grade. I'm sorry, 23 in the second grade. That's not a bad class size for a second grade classroom. No classes at the elementary level will be above 25. I also want to note that the cutting of those 4 sections will mean releasing currently leave replacement teachers. There are no teachers currently being accessed in that situation. That doesn't mean that we won't have to think about some potential accessing to get us across the finish line. But as of right now, those cuts do not include permanent staff. We were going to put 2 elementary RTI providers, coaches into the buildings. We're no longer going to do that. We are going to be looking at non-essential aides and monitors through attrition. We get a lot of retirements and resignations at the end of the year, so we believe we can do that without losing any current staff. But we do need to look at the non-essential, non-mandated spots. All non-essential software and BOCES contracts will be reduced. Chris Cowder has been absolutely phenomenal in looking over the budget, looking at our software. Obviously, things teachers use across the board, we're going to keep. But if like 2 teachers are using a software program that is a license for the whole district, we're not going to be paying for that. During COVID, we ramped up our software quite a bit, and we feel like we can reduce that in certain areas and be clever about it. And we're going to be very clear with staff about which ones those are. But we're going to the least used programs we're going to be removing from circulation. We're going to be doing reductions in technology support staff in the 1 tech and our data specialist will be removed from the budget, and we'll find alternative ways to get that work done. We're going to be condensing transportation runs to be more efficient. I met with Ms. Messerol in our transportation department, looking at the number of students on each bus. The issue there is that students have a right to ride the bus if they live within a certain mileage, but yet we're looking at these buses and they're half empty going to school. And in fact, at the high school, we have buses that have the bus door opens, it's a giant bus and 3 kids get out. Well, you still legally have to run that bus because they have a right to be on that bus. So we're going to send out an email to the community tomorrow with a statement saying that we would like to try to save funds for taxpayers and to get us at the cap. If you are currently have access to a bus but are not planning on using it, you can opt out. And if we can get a certain number of opt-outs, we can reduce the number of buses. 1 long bus costs $180,000 a year. So if we could reduce 2 or 3 buses, that could be a significant savings. And I would just say to any parents who drive their kid to school every single day and you never use the bus and you don't intend to, please give us a chance and please waive your bus just for 1 year, see how it goes. Every bus I can reduce will save program and jobs. And we will be removing all non-essential supplies and materials. Everything on this list.
Excuse me, Dr. Ferris?
Yes.
That just to clarify, that opt-out for the transportation would be a yearly question. That
It would be a yearly question.
Okay, so if you opt out this year, it doesn't necessarily mean
Right. I don't want to, you're not committing for life
Okay.
because you might have a situation that changes where you need the bus, and I don't want to make it so that a parent couldn't get the bus back. But I do feel that we could save a lot of money on these empty buses. And I think we have to ask the community to really do a, if you used it once this year and that's it, can you please give that up and just, drive to school? But again, you're entitled to it, so no one's taking it away from you. And again, we can save some money there. All of the things on here is everything I could possibly, we, the administrative team, the principals, the central office staff, the board could think of that doesn't directly, it indirectly affects kids, but doesn't directly affect kids in classrooms and programs. So there's still not a single program touched. And class sizes, again, as I said, will not be higher than 25 in the elementary schools, and they'll be about mid-20s in the middle school and high school, which is what they've been for years. So nothing here affects our programs or the daily experience of a kid going to class. I've cut with that number $3,083,207. I am now sitting at a deficit of $1.2 million that I have to make up. And I'm going to try and again, we're going to have more meetings tomorrow. We're going to have meetings on Monday, looking at every single possible angle that doesn't affect kids. Can we glean out? We're going to look at our BOCES contracts. We're going to look at our COSERs. We're going to look at anything that has been used somewhat, but not really essential, and that does not affect kids directly. And my commitment to the board, to the staff, to the unions, is to touch everything that doesn't touch teaching and program first before I go to that next level, which is staffing and programs. I don't know how far we'll be able to take it, and I do think we'll have to touch some programs and some staffing, but I would like to minimize that to the greatest degree possible. Sorry. So that tells the story of our revenues, why they are what they are. Some of them we knew about, some of them snuck up on us, and it took, it kind of was a gut punch several days ago to get some of these numbers. And then our expenditures, which is where we're trying to get to where we need to go. We have a great school district, and we want to maintain that. And if we can get through this school year, I don't think there's any revenue surprises, I can't promise it, that would get any different than that. If state aid continues to be what we hope it will be, we can benefit from that next year. And one of the things we did last year was a retirement incentive. And sometimes when you do that, it helps you in the year you do the incentive. We had 18 retirements. We didn't replace 9 teachers, but in the year after, you get no retirements. And we have 1 retirement this year. So part of the natural progression is if you get 8 retirements every year, it stays steady, and you use that retirement. You lose a teacher that costs a certain amount, and then you hire a new teacher. There's a significant savings. So if you have a steady flow of retirements, you can bring your costs down quite a bit. It helped us get through last year, but then this year, the effect is that some people who would have stayed and then retired this year are not present. So you have to wait probably till next year to get 6 or 7 or 10 retirements. And we do see a steady flow of retirements coming in the future, in not next year, the year after, and the year after, which will help you get your numbers of the expenses down while your revenue is going up. So this is the status of where we are. The board is going to have to discuss a couple of things. I want to talk about the Universal Pre-K program. We currently run 8 sections of that program. We get funding for that program, but it does cost us about $60,000 per section. So we have gotten everybody in pretty much with 8 sections. We've run 6 in the past and had a wait list. We've run 4 in the past and had a wait list. So that's an area we could look at. I loathe to say this, but the program that we started 2 years ago with elementary world language is another area that we have to look at. And I'm not saying it's a definitive, but that's an area to look at. Could save us $190,000 if we just did not do that program. I think we should be looking at the Stretch program at the elementary school, because at the time Stretch existed, there were no other enrichment programs, and currently we do have enrichment with coding and librarian coding programs, and also the STEAM program we have to look at as well. So there are areas to talk about. I'm hoping we can minimize not talking about those areas, but those are the areas that have play. Anything else would be reducing things that have existed in the district for quite a while. And I want to stay away from some of those items, to be honest with you. I want to run our electives. I want to run our AP courses. I want to run all of the opportunities that students have at the middle school and high school. And I want to be able to do that as we always have. But we have to be kind of smart and thoughtful about where we go and what cuts we do put in place. But I don't think we can get to the end of this road without some give somewhere. And now I'm going to introduce Ms. Messeril, who's going to kind of go now over the numbers and the detail. I hope that was just painting the broad picture, and then I'll come back and we'll answer questions together.
Okay, good evening. Thank you, Dr. Ferris, for that introduction and where it brings us tonight. If you looked at the budget calendar at this point in time, we would be showing a balanced budget of revenues and expenditures. So tonight, it will just be our proposed revenues and the status of our expenditures thus far. Typically, when you prepare a budget, it's expenditure driven. And we started with our departments, building the dreams and those things that we wanted to put in place. However, knowing the status of our revenues, that has become our starting point at this point. So as Dr. Ferris had shared, our 2025-2026 budget now stands at $105,676,793. And yes, that is a decrease budget to budget of $351,838 or minus 0.33%. And as I shared in the last budget presentation, the calculation of our tax levy cap came in at 2.203%, and that added another $1,454,256 to the revenues over last year. That was the maximum cap, and that is what was filed with the New York State Comptroller's Office. Yes.
Just, can you go back to that slide? The one that with the
Oh, I'm sorry.
percentages.
Which one?
The percentages that would show the tax levy.
Yeah. That's it.
No,
The next one.
the next one.
Oh, I didn't get past this one.
She's not there yet. She's not
Okay,
there.
then I'm ahead of you.
Okay,
Let her continue.
Sorry.
you're trying to confuse me. Okay. So here, this is the chart that looks familiar because I shared it the last time. And the 2025-2026 is bolded at the bottom. The maximum allowable tax levy percentage is at the 2.203%, and that is what the actual tax levy is at this moment in time. Is this the slide
That
that
is
you
the
were
slide.
referring? Okay.
I was
And-
just looking
and
at it, sorry. in advance.
Historical data on what the calculation was at the maximum and then where we went to. And in a few instances, we did go under the tax levy cap first in 2020-21 and then last year.
No, and I just want to mention, because we were talking about the revenue situation, and last year we went under the cap. And because we wanted to give the money back to the community. And as you can see, the tax cap is lower this year. And in reality, if we would have probably went to the cap last year, we would have had some more reserves. That again, that impacted our reserves.
Yes, a little
Yeah.
bit. So it's like a domino effect.
Yep.
You then begin at a lower base
Yeah.
when you then apply the new calculation. And each year, the calculation is different based upon your debt service payments and the capital projects that you're preparing for.
If I can ask, how much are you talking, Tom? What would that have been?
So,
So
oh, I'm sorry.
Rhonda can answer that.
So when really what we gave back to the taxpayers between the 3.996 and 3.077 was, I think it was about 186,000 something. I can get the exact figure for you.
that's fine. I thought you were talking much bigger.
No. But why that was done also was because last year was also a difficult budget year in planning, and we had built the dreams. And then when the governor brought out her executive budget, we were cut, and then it was a push for the Save Harmless. So through that process, it was sort of like we understood the magnitude on our residents, and it was sort of a recognition that the tax burden does lie there. And I believe it was the belief of the board to go with a lower tax levy cap. And I always put this disclaimer at the bottom, but just so that it's clear, our residents vote on the district's tax levy, not the tax rate. So even when I give estimated values of what the tax levy would be for our residents in 25, 26, I'm using the final assessment values that were provided by the town for the 24, 25 year. I don't know what that usually comes out in August. So it's an estimate, but the tax rates are all dependent on each resident's individual assessment value to their home. So I apologize, this is a little bit tiny. It's hard to get it all in one place, but at the top, I'm going to go to my own page here. So what it does is it breaks down, this is our total revenue budget, and it's comparative to the 24-25 year. And I just want to say also, I say this at the end of every presentation, but these presentations are placed on our website. So if you can't see it, you can go to the website, hopefully tomorrow, and see it, and then you can digest more of it or blow it up or look at it closer. And if ever anyone has a question or needs that information provided to them, I'm happy to do so. Comparatively, we start with the state aid. And what we show on the left-hand side is our 2025, 2026 amounts, and then the 20 compared to the adopted budget of 2024, 25. And as Dr. Ferris had said, that is a negative variance of 597, 197. And I'm going to get into that more in a few slides. Next, another category of our revenues is the pilots. And there again, that is from one pilot, not officially on our tax rolls. And when I reach out to the town for that information, I was provided information through the IDA that the Bristol had challenged their taxes, and that going forward, the pilot their assessed value was reduced. So that meant that the pilot was going to be less for 2025, 26. And then I delved a little deeper with them in my inquiries, and they provided me the settlement of the reduction of the assessed values. It was not only just for the 2025, 26 year, but they had challenged their taxes all the way back to 2015, 16. So what they did, and the largest piece of the tax bill is on the school district. So they provided refunds all within the 24-25 year. This was never told to the district. So as even the library reached out, why is it half of what we anticipated? Because they get a percentage of that pilot payment as well. So all of the credits were done in the 24-25 year. So that contributed to our shortfall in this year and then moving forward. Next is the break.
Rhonda, I'm so
Yes.
sorry. I just have a question. Is there
Yes.
this might be a silly question, but can we not argue that could be spread out? Because they all have to be in this year?
So we're not our own assessing unit. So we put in what our tax levy is, but similarly, every resident may challenge their taxes. They don't do that through us. They do that with the town. So the town has their tax grievance days, and they listen to all of this. They make assessments on what the properties, and they either say yes or no, or this is what we will reduce it by. And then, typically there's a refund piece and then a lowered assessed value moving forward.
So there's no challenge on the refund piece?
It's not a challenge on our part.
On our part, okay. Thank you.
So
I think they should communicate it a little bit to us,
Yeah.
especially since we're,
Okay.
I think, 73% of the tax bill, but they don't. And I wouldn't have known that unless I called. I have my contacts, so I reach out to them.
So Rhonda, that 42.85%, that doesn't mean that they grieve their taxes and they got a 42.85% a decrease in their taxes. That means that's including the payments back to 2015.
No, so what we're looking at just here is budgeted data. So
Okay.
I now, knowledge is powerful. And when we build a budget, we're building it based on the information that we currently have. So last year, we did not know that they were going to challenge their taxes. So the tax cap was calculated. We knew that they were officially like not a pilot anymore. When you have new building, you can go up to 10 years. So that ended in 23, 24. But we anticipated that based on the full now taxing power, that property would derive a revenue to us of 786,600. And we learn now, no, we're not getting that. We're getting half. But the variance you see here is just now reflective of what we might anticipate from that Bristol for the 25, 26 year. So the variance is what we anticipated getting for 24, 25, and now our new anticipated amount based on the information that was provided to us. But that's the budget, yeah. And I guess
Right.
budget is actual, yeah.
Right. So they grieved and they got
They did.
42% off their taxes, which
Yeah.
would never happen to one of us as an individual taxpayer.
And I don't know
But I
what
think you have
that process,
Yeah.
how they decided that.
But I think what's special about the Bristol is because of this pilot program that they're in with the town, those monies are directly allocated to the school. Where if it was a normal grievance, they would that burden would be shared with all the taxpayers, correct?
So
Yeah.
the library has a piece of that. They're
Yeah.
not getting as much, and then it goes down, the
But what
row.
I'm saying is normal town residents that grieve their taxes, that doesn't create an extra burden to the school district because the levy is still collected.
Yes,
where the-
that's
where-
spread.
Where pilot payments are in lieu of property taxes, which is a special deal that the town grants the Bristol.
Yes.
And they actually should expire at some point.
And even though the town makes the deal, we get affected by it and
Yeah.
have no control over the deal that they make.
Yes, and they're not officially on the tax rolls yet, so they're being treated sort of like an independent party.
Okay.
So then we have a detail of more of the other incomes, and it's very detailed here for you. We do have rent from 2 buildings that we own and are occupied by BOCES, Eastern Suffolk BOCES, different programs we run. And as Dr. Ferris had also mentioned, the tuition is a piece of that as well. And that is something that we anticipated receiving. Even the 500,000, we try to be a little more conservative on the revenue side. And if you looked at actual amounts that we received in prior years, that was more. So we figured, okay, 500,000 is a good estimate to use. But even that did not yield to what we actually will be receiving. So now we brought that down. New knowledge, we brought that down to 150,000. So the total other income is, the category there. It's for the 25-26 year. We're anticipating 3.7 million in other income sources. And then below that, we have the amounts of the reserves that we're appropriating toward the 25-26 year, as well as our fund balance. Those are, I kind of coined them rainy day funds, but it's like the money we have set aside that we appropriate also to help balance our budget. And then below we have our property taxes. So to the right, which you can see clearer, we use assessed value of 45,000, a home estimated average of 450,000. So there you can comparatively see what it was for 24-25 and then what it is anticipated for 25-26, which is a $211 annual increase broken down by month, $17.50. So here you can see this a little clearer, and it's the broader categories, not with the detail. And I do have a big star up there with the variance of the 597,197, which I'll explain in the next slide. But here you can just see where we are at 25-26, and that's as per the executive budget for the state aid piece. and the other amounts there and appropriated reserves. The state aid proposed is from the governor's executive budget. We have understood that they hope to have a budget not by April 1, but shortly thereafter. And there is some talk about perhaps an increase to the foundation aid or other things that the legislators are hoping to get into the final governor's budget.
Yeah, a few weeks ago, Ms. Messerel and I went to the refit breakfast where we heard from some assembly men and women. And one of the things they were optimistic about was raising the amount of foundation aid to school districts like ours by 2%. That would be equate of $400,000. So we won't know that till after April 1st, but that's why we're proposing that we do our final budget presentation to the board after we get the legislative budget, because that might help to impact, some of our decision making.
And also just under the fund balance across that line, the negative variance of 434, that's something that we knew about, and I'm sure was mentioned in last year's budget presentations, but that committed fund balance is part of it's the 434. So 5 or 6 years ago, more than that, the district had self-funded their own health insurance plans. And they decided that they then were going to transition to NISHIP, which is largely what most school districts and other governmental agencies use for their health insurance, because it's a pooled public insurance plan. So what happened there is the Sayville was part of a conglomerate of other school districts that also have self-insured their health insurance. And when we pulled out of that, there were certain, I guess, reserves that they had for claims for the Sayville School District that they then finally released. So that was to be committed and to be used in future budgets. And that was done systematically, but it ran out. So it was, I think, 1.6 million, and it's in one of the other slides.
And I just want to comment, like, that's something, as an example of something we knew was coming and we were planning for. And if that alone was what happened, we would be in a different situation. But the combination of all of that aid and all of those things is what's making it challenging.
Okay, so hold tight, this next slide. And there, I know, I'm going to read it because you can't see it. But again, go on the website and you can read through it. So this is just the state aid. And the first column is the 24-25 budget, adopted budget, and what was put in for state aid. The 2025-26 state aid column is what is part of the executive budget as we know it today. So the negative variance that has the arrow at the bottom is 547,197. And in this, you must also include or add to this a minus 50,000 because that represents CPSE administrative state aid, which is applied for annually by the district. We're entitled to a reimbursement for all costs that are of administrative type through the CPS meetings that are held. And that's not a part of the governor's budget or on state aid runs. It's filed through the county and it's separate and distinct. So that is money that we get. And I believe the budget for 24-25, it had the 50,000. I still am not in receipt of the money, but that actually for 24-25 is about 77,000. So again, you try to be conservative. You don't know what those costs are going to be, but just if you want to reconcile to the 597,197 in the state aid figure, it is included in that. So you just to reconcile, you have to add that back. So the major variance here is the last line, universal pre-K. So oddly enough, on all of the state aid runs, that is always a part. When you go and you get them printed, it will always show the universal pre-K there. That is not a revenue of our general fund. It is a revenue of our special aid fund, which is where we house all of the activity for our federal and state grants. When Universal Pre-K started, it was a combination of federal and state monies, probably a little more federal. And then as the years went down, less federal, more state. In 24-25, 100% state. So that's why it was a practice to always include that, because it's on the state aid runs. But it really is not a revenue of the general fund, the budget that our residents vote on and cast their vote on. So we also showed on the expenditure side. So I just think for a clearer presentation, we're stopping that practice of showing the universal pre-K in here. There's also a misnomer. Just because the governor has said, Sayville is entitled to $745,200 doesn't mean that's necessarily what we may receive. We receive $5,400 per student served in our UPK program. That number equates to 138 students. In some years, I believe we ran, as Dr. Ferris said, 4 classes, some 6. Last year, or for this year, 24-25, we ran 8 programs, 8 classes, of 18 students. So we were able to derive the full benefit of that aid. But if we didn't service 138 students, we're going to get however many students we serviced at the 5,400. The other information is that there is some talk about increasing that 50. It's been 5,400 for a number of years. Nothing is finalized yet, but we can hope that that is a number that gets increased in the final
When would we
legislative
find out
budget.
if that increases?
That's
Is
all
that
what
also
they're
the same
working
time?
out.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. So, so for clarity, that is coming out, and that's why it's a negative variance. So, I think it's important to show that. The other variances in between the foundation aid and the universal pre-K, those are all of our expenditure-driven aids. So even in the 25-26 budget, the governor is estimating, based on our historical data, what we may anticipate receiving for each of those different categories. However, that number is reconciled after our ST3 and financials are submitted. Sometime in November, they put out new output reports, and those numbers are either negatively or positively adjusted based on what our actual expenditures were for the year prior. So 24-25 actual state aid will yield based on our actual 23-24, whether it be transportation aid, building aid. We also never receive full transportation aid because we're actually transporting under the state mandated distances. So they won't give us full aid for that. But those are choices that we make, so we know that. So I hope that helps explain maybe some of the variances a little clearer. Also, it's important to know that those expenditure-driven aids are not formula-based like the foundation.
So let me
aid.
just speak to the UPK. So UPK can't be on 2 sides of a ledger. It can't be on the aid side giving you money and also on the expenditure side saving you money. So we can't have it listed on that side. So we do have it listed in the expenditure side as a grant fund. So when we run pre-K, we have 8 pre-K teachers. I think 6 of them are covered by the grant. So when we look at our expense side, those 6 teachers there's a 0 next to their name and they're covered by the grant. But what we can't do is do that on the expense side and at the same time have it in the revenue side. So we had to put it where people recommend we put it on the expenditure side, which shows the negative on the revenue side.
Yeah, so we're pulling it out of both the revenues and the expenditures because that's where it showed. Okay, so the next slide here, and I want to point out that it might be a little reverse, but so on the left-hand column, that is our 24-25 actual state aid figures now, what we anticipate receiving. On the right side, estimated, it says January 21st, 2025. That's when the governor released her executive budget. So that is our 25-26 state aid. And here again, it shows that the total aid, and these are always in the aid runs, and then it backs out the universal pre-K because that is booked in the special aid fund. So that shows, even though we are receiving, and obviously they're the extra 2% in our foundation aid, and then some are down and some are up in terms of the expenditure-driven aids. And then I just then again also clarify here that the universal pre-K allotment is $5,400 per student. And 8 classes, we have 144 students in our program. We received aid on 138. But the 144 rounds out nice classrooms of 18. Okay, so I know it's a lot of data at this hour and tiny print. So this here is an analysis of our reserves and our fund balance. And we start here, because you always kind of show, 5 years, start at the actual of 2019, 2020. And the first part of the top part of this graph is our restricted fund balance or our reserves. And each one of these reserves listed individually stands for something different, very specific. There are different rules for each of the uses of these reserves, and it's all part of general municipal law. So the first 2 reserves are our workers' comp reserve and our unemployment reserve. And those are did I just do that? Our first 2 reserves are our self-insurance reserves for workers' comp and unemployment. So we're self-insured for those 2 things. Workers' comp, as you can see, though we've used a lot of those reserves, and in the last couple of years, we haven't further funded those. We're still okay on that, but these are things that we're going to have to look to also fund, because the funding of reserves comes when you have an operating surplus to some degree. You're capped at 4% of next year's budget for your fund balance. But these reserves allow us to make strategic plans so that when there are spikes or changes in certain years in terms of rates for our ERS or TRS, we're able to smooth out those spikes in rates. So the one below it, unemployment, that we explained last year, during COVID, unemployment was crazy. People were receiving unemployment. There were scams all over the place. So we were paying unemployment. And then when the New York State Unemployment Board was able to reconcile all of those things, we received a large refund. But because we're self-insured for unemployment, that money could only go into our unemployment reserve. So last year, our first year, we made the board approved a resolution to move $600,000 of that reserve, because it can only be done by resolution, into our fund balance so that we could use it towards our budget. There still was an excess, and we had mentioned we'll be able to do that again next year. So we will be asking the board to resolve to use another 700, and then that will bring that unemployment reserve to where it really needs to be. And that's the only way that you can get the money out of an unemployment reserve into a usable source. So then after that, we have our ERS and TRS reserves. Those are only for the employees' retirement system for that class of our employees, and then the teachers' retirement system for our administrators and our teachers. And the TRS is a larger expense and contribution because it's a larger pool of our staff. And that is a newer reserve. So that in itself is lower than the ERS because it's newer. However, we have seen a steady decline in that. And this year, you'll see in our 25-26 proposed budget, we're proposing appropriating $650 to that reserve. Well, if we did another 650 in the next year, we're not going to have that reserve anymore to utilize. So this is the purpose of this slide, just to see what we do in analyzing how much we're appropriating towards the budget and where we're going and the trends. So then the next one, reserve for employee benefit, that's our accrued liability. That was used appropriately last year when we had our large retirements. That reserve holds money for accrued sick time. And then when we had our 18, I believe, retirements, a lot of those staff members were here for years and they had accumulated sick days. And so those payouts were made from that reserve. And that reserve is still pretty healthy. The remaining reserves for debt, tax reduction, and bonded debt, those are reserves that happen as the result of a transaction. So for the debt reserve in the library, that's the library's piece of that reserve, and they use it over the years. They communicate to us how much they're going to be applying to their budget. That's on a serial bond. You go out for a bond. I'm just going to break it down. You get $1 million bond. You spend $950 on projects. That remaining $50,000 goes into a reserve, and you must use it to pay down that specific debt service on that bond. Same with our reserve for bonded debt. The one for tax reduction, that is the result of a sale of a piece of property. So that is gone because you have to use it within a certain number of years after you use that. And you can use it in 1 year or over, I think it's 10 years. Don't quote me, but it's a specific number of years. And then the last reserve that we added in May of 2022 with the budget vote, was a separate referendum for the 22-23 year, was the capital reserve. And that actually was funded at $1 million in May of 2023. And since then, it's grown some interest. So all of these reserves are in accounts earning interest. But if you're pulling out more money than the interest that's earning, obviously that affects the balances. The middle piece is our assigned fund balance. I spoke about that, the committed fund balance and the assigned appropriated. And you can just see where that total number is. We're almost back to 2019-20. And then our unassigned fund balance. So below is a projection. We do fund balance projections to see where are we ending toward the end of the year. This is part of our plan and where we need to make sure we're going. And we are reflecting an operating deficit of almost 2.7 million. So typically around this time of year, we send out memos that, we're going to be cutting off purchase orders. It's typical in every school district. If you have equipment needs or supply needs, you should be getting those early on in the year so that the students can have access to those items on. But, some of it is cyclical. Some things are planned. Early on, we do a lot of blanket POs at the beginning of the fiscal year, but that is something that, is a message that is sent. So that is our analysis of fund balance and the components of that. Here is just a draft resolution. We're looking to take $700,000 from that unemployment reserve, and that would really be the remaining excess that exists there. And this is just resolution language, and we would do that before the end of June 30th, 2025. This is just a graph that shows our revenues as proposed for 25-26, and the largest piece of it, of course, being from our property taxes at 64%. The next big category being our state aid at 27%. We have our appropriated fund balance and reserves at the bottom there, I believe at 5%, and then just the other income and our pilot. So transportation, this is one of the expenditures that I can speak about. On this evening's board agenda, there will be a resolution to award our RFP, request for proposal for transportation. That for our regular buses, field trips, athletics, and parochial and special education buses was on February 21st. So that bid request for proposal closed, and we had one vendor, one sole vendor, Suffolk Transportation Services, Inc., which we have been very pleased with. And we knew this was coming because of the talk about zero emission buses for busing companies throughout the country to either recruit or retain drivers is very, very difficult. Part of our scoring process for the RFP is to actually take a tour of Suffolk Transportation Services. They have a lot of very nice facilities. I sat and spoke for hours with the officers. They shared some of the things that they are doing, some of it with GPS and different things coming to the future. They have a plan for electric buses. They already have 11 in their fleet. So they are a very good vendor. They know our students. They know our routes. So I'm pleased that we had a vendor, and they will be awarded this evening a 5-year contract. That is my recommendation. A 1-year contract we could do, but a 5-year contract, we wouldn't pay what we would in 1 year until year 3. So in essence, we're getting a 2-year savings, but let me go through that.
Rhonda, is that typical to receive one bid for something that big?
So I don't want to say that these vendors are territorial, but usually people have their areas. They certainly have very well placed facilities. They have a number of them all over. I think we're serviced through Pond Road, but they have training centers. But there are, I know I had done an RFP in my last district, and they usually are.
I would like to add, because we went to the Islip Town School Board meeting, and Suffolk Transportation gave a presentation there. And they also indicated that the number of vendors that are in that business are, they were mom and pop shops or whatever, that
Right.
they, with COVID and everything they went out of business.
Acme,
And the
yeah, they
ones-
didn't survive.
The ones that are in existence, they're pretty much stretched to where they can go. So it is very difficult when the bidding process comes in, because there's not many
Well,
bids.
it's ironic that
Yeah.
you use the word bidding process, because there's no bidding process. If there's
Yeah.
one person bidding,
Yeah.
it's a borderline monopoly. So
Yeah.
when you look at something that says 22.89%
Okay,
increase,
but
but they
doesn't-
know that
doesn't-
nobody's going to come in.
But this is also explained though too. We had a contract for 5 years, and in the last contract, and those rates are relatively low.
Right.
So of course with all the we all know all the increases and everything.
Yeah.
So obviously, it's a shock to our system. But unfortunately, there's no other game in town.
No, I know if
you're
nobody puts in a bid, that's why I asked if it was typical, because
There are less
if it is
companies.
if you're telling me like it's territorial and they typically run this area, and by geography
Yeah.
their what is it, yard, like their
Yeah.
yard is it's
They also
beneficial-
have-
it's beneficial for them to shoot for the moon, and when they
But-
return the RFP.
And I understand that. However, what they explained, I really anticipated a 25% increase. What they shared with me was that what we're seeing in this 22.89 is what they need to offer their staff to get good staff that they're constantly training and retain as well. So it does have, an impact. I
Yeah.
thought it
I mean,
was
listen,
more
you can
about
only deal
electric
with-
buses.
You
but-
can only deal with who puts the bid in, right? Like
Yes.
there's nothing you can do about it.
And the only way to save money in this area is to try to reduce our ridership.
Which
by-
I think is
by
huge.
volunteerism. So we're going to
absolutely.
try to do a campaign for that. Maybe the PTAs would help us spread the word that this is something that would be good for the district.
You don't do it.
Not a fundraiser. Get out the decline the bus vote. That's lucrative.
And they are family owned. Suffolk Transportation Services is family owned. They give scholarships every year to students. I mean, they are a really, I feel, a top notch.
I mean, There's
company.
all-
I'm
and
not,
that-
I don't get paid from them, but, I do have to make that assessment, and I do believe
And,
they.
and what I hear also from other districts too, like the districts that have their own buses, they have to somehow deal with these mandates that are coming down from the state as well. So there's really no ideal, way to go with the buses.
Yeah, so the 5-year contract provides continuity and predictability. So we'll know what our costs are now for the next 5 years. And the 2025, 2026 school year, we would be in year 1 of a 5-year contract. So, and we have to be very transparent about that. So the other expenditure that I can speak with certainty on is our transfers to capital and special aid funds. So each year, our district puts together $1 million for different programs and capital projects. And this is outside of bonded. So you can either fund capital projects through a serial bond, which we have currently, our roofs and our high school HVAC and in the cafeteria and auditorium. And there's a lot of process
No,
that
that's
goes
fine.
into
That's
planning
fine.
these projects. So what we have completed now with the 2024-25 year is our elementary bathroom renovations. And what we're moving now on to is our secondary
1 second.
levels. Oh, I'm sorry.
Tom asked me if we could explain how the capital line works. We're not adding $1 million to like a program or anything. It's not like we're putting it in a reserve. There is a line in our budget every year for the last several years that was $1 million, and it's used to upkeep our plant. And it's outside of the tax cap. Could you explain just how that works and just?
So it's a component of the tax
Yeah.
cap.
Yeah.
However, dollar for dollar, if we were to remove this, it's not going to help us with our current situation and cuts. And there's a lot of groundwork that is done in order to get these projects to a place where we may actually be able to construct.
Right.
the
And I also just want
items.
to add, in a year where we're reducing all of our buildings and grounds projects that we have in our budget, it's really important that we don't become a district that does this, where we don't put these capital projects in place, because in 3 or 4 years, you look around and you'll notice, and things will be, we need, these bathrooms are in some cases from the 70s and 80s, and we just had to replace a bathroom at the high school because the pipe burst and there was asbestos. It cost us $160,000, I believe.
125.
Thank you.
Yeah.
$125,000 because it just was so old. So we can't wait for those moments to be unplanned and not have them. And now that takes money away from what we were going to spend or save for taxpayers for the future. So this is a really effective way at maintaining your plant and making sure you keep a schedule based on the engineering reports that we get about what we should be doing.
Yeah, our infrastructure is as important because you can't have students learning in crumbling or, inferior buildings. So, and it is 4 bathrooms at our middle school that are identified. I have pictures in a slide or two, and then 4 in our high school. The other transfer that we're required to make each year is for our special aid, to our special aid fund, and those are for our special education summer programs. We pay 20%. The state pays 80% for those summer school programs. So that is the interfund transfer line that you will see in a future presentation of our total expenditure budget. So here is the before in big letters. They are clean because we have a wonderful facilities staff. They're just very old and in need of, renovation. So there's a boys and girls middle school auditorium bathrooms outside of the auditorium there. And then also right outside of the middle school cafeteria and around the corner is a boys and girls bathroom.
When I was looking at the slide earlier, I read it quickly and I'm saying before and after. And I'm looking left and right. And I'm saying they both look
No.
bad. I'm
Yes.
just trying to figure out what are we trying to sell you? So they're all
Yes,
before pictures. All
They
of them.
are.
We
And
haven't done the work.
No, I know.
yes. And yeah, a picture can say 1,000 words, but in our high school, we have, those are the boys. They're smaller bathrooms, but the high school near our gym is boys and girls bathroom there. And below near our guidance area is a boys and girls. So, and the renovations of the bathrooms that we have done have come out beautifully, and they're very easy to maintain. So it is something that, keeps us busy in the summer, but good stuff. So these are a schedule of our future meetings. March 27th is what we have slated. I'm not sure that how that will go.
Yeah, I'm going to say right now, we're going to change that to April 9th or 10th. I'm not sure exactly, because we want to wait till the legislative budget comes out. Last year, we did 4 versions of a budget, and then we were on April 20th doing them. I think it would be, I'm not going to propose cutting a program if we're going to get funding back. So I think we should stick with, we will give progress updates at each board meeting. So I will update the board on March 27th with Ms. Messerol about what additional cuts we're recommending and how much closer we are to the cap. As I said, we're at 1.2 million away from the cap. Our goal is to continue to meet with our admin team, our staff, talk about what we can live without that least impacts our children, and then come back with what we've come up with to you as a board, and hopefully get that number 1.2 down to closer to 0.
Okay, and whenever that meeting takes place, you will certainly have both the proposed revenues and expenditures, as well as a 3-part budget, which we're required to show what a contingent budget looks like, and perhaps additional voting information. I don't know if then the second bullet of additional meeting, but we'll somehow work that in so that our residents have a full, and our Board of Ed has enough knowledge before they actually have to adopt a budget on April 23rd, because that is both, I think, the last time we can prepare for a Board of Ed adoption date on a proposed budget, as well as that is the BOCES budget vote. And then during April and May, we'll be out to our smaller groups, our PTA groups, our other community groups, just being present to answer questions and present the data. And then finally, the culmination is on May 20th, which is the annual board election and budget vote. So for the school district, our Proposition 1 is just a school budget vote. We have no other referendums being put on. There's also the election of 2 Board of Education trustees. The library will continue to be part of our ballot. That would probably be a Proposition number 2, right, Julie? And then the historical also the Historical Society joins in on that ballot too. And just to remind everyone again that it's the same place, May 20th, same time, except a different room within the old junior high, a renovated gym. So we think that's a positive change for our residents. And just a thank you for our strong community. You come to board meetings, you're engaged. Our Board of Ed works tirelessly so that all of these programs can be, structured in the perfect way for our students. And so.
Thanks.
Thank
And I want
you.
to thank Ms. Messerol for her work on this, all of the detail and all of the things that we do. We talk about things, she has to make it happen in the budget book. So we really appreciate that from you as well. And I just again want to say to the community, to the staff that's here, we are committed to doing everything we possibly can to get this budget at the cap and to minimize the impact it has on our students. This is not going to be easy, but we are not resting. We will not sleep until we get it to where it needs to be. And we're going to be working with our unions, working with our admin team to kind of get through this to the best of our ability. We have 2 ways that this can go. We could work collaboratively and keep kind of focusing on the goal in hand, or people can start pointing fingers and saying, you should cut that, you should cut that, you're hiding something, you're doing something. The truth of the matter is every single person in this room, myself included, cares about our kids. And everything we do is about our kids. And budgets are really important because the budgets fund the programs. So I know Facebook and the world will start saying all the things that are wrong because that's what people do. Call us. We have telephones. We have email. Ask questions. There's nothing we're hiding. We're being very very genuine about what the issues are that we're facing and our approach in how we want to tackle them. So we appreciate your time and your attention. And if there's anything else we can do, please reach out to us and let us know. And we'll take questions from the board.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but last year's state aid and also this year's state aid run, because we didn't get any CPI increase. Basically, we just got like a set amount. It
Last year we did not.
Yeah.
Right.
And the same thing, I believe, is this year. That's what the legislators are fighting for, to add a CPI.
I don't know if they're calling it CPI, but the governor gave us basically a 1.96, or what they're saying is a 2% increase to foundation aid. So that was about to the tune of, I believe, $400 and some thousand. The legislature is saying they are very confident that they want to get an additional 2%, if not 3%, to hold harmless districts, because other districts got much larger increases. Other districts got 7%, 8%, 10% increases. We're a hold harmless district because of the nature of who we are, and we've been in that category for a very long time. And so we got a 2% minimum increase. So it was a good increase, and at the time we were thrilled with it because it's more funding for our schools. But when we offset it with the other things that Ms. Messerol has described, we're still down $590 something thousand in state aid overall. That's not the foundation aid. The foundation aid is up. It's the expense-driven aids and the UPK shift that we had to do that make it a net loss in that category of close to $600,000.
Okay. The reason I raise that is because I just like to make the community aware that maybe if they could contact the state legislature to hear the voices, because many districts got more, so there's not that much talking about it, and it's not like last year because they were giving us nothing, with the hold harmless. So we need the voices of the community to contact them and make them aware that this aid is crucial to our district.
Is there a way, Mark, that we can find out what comparable districts like Bayport and Islip have received?
Oh yeah, all the state runs are available to look at. There's a website, and you can go on it. I can send you guys the link, and you can look up literally every school district in New York State, and you can see what the differences were and what they got. So hold harmless districts got basically 1.9 something percent. They're calling it a 2%, and other districts that we were the lowest amount, and other districts got more. But I don't want to bank on us getting more funding. I hope we do, and that will certainly help. The work that we have to do now is to dig into our budget and continue to reduce expenses, and hopefully reduce expenses that are not staff related and not student program related.
Even if we were to receive that 2 or 3%, how much are we talking about?
400 grand.
2% would be 400 grand, 3% would be 600 grand.
And even with all the cuts that you proposed, we're still 1.2
Right,
million.
but if we got, as just an example, 600,000 from the state in addition, we could really make up ground with minimal cuts.
So I guess the question is, I feel like, and obviously I wasn't here last year, but I would come to the meetings and I would see all the work that you guys were doing, and now I see behind the scenes the work that gets done. Last year we offered the incentive, right, and that helped us. Okay, this year we're proposing cuts. No people, no programs. Right. Hopefully is the plan. Right. That's
well, I wouldn't say as of right now, there's no people, no programs.
Right.
But I don't know if we're going to be able to get that 1.2 down without touching programs. We have to talk about those programs.
Understood. So my question is, what can we do? Right. Like what can we do as a board? I'm asking, I guess, Rhonda and Mark, what can we do to stop like just putting our fingers in the hole and, to kind of look down the road, and so that we don't find ourselves like in this position every year where you're trying to, manipulate numbers left and right. Mark's trying to manipulate numbers, and we're having to make these difficult decisions. What is it that we can do, if anything, to prevent something like this happening again? So put ourselves in a more like financially stable position year after year, where we don't have to like continuously just plug the holes.
So if I can just interrupt. So Sayville, I find this very sad because Sayville prided itself on its secure financial situation for years. So what did happen? And as Desmond, we have such a fiduciary responsibility to our community. This is not okay.
So again, this is not something that Sayville did or Sayville didn't plan for. This is something that, as you saw, there were 5 or 6 factors that happened to happen at the same exact time that affected our revenue. The state aid, the Bristol, like there was nothing in our control that we could pride ourselves on everything that happened in
But
the
that was
past.
$300,000.
Right, and
We're
each one on
talking
their
millions.
right, each one on their own causes a minor problem. But when you add them all together, that's $1.9 million in lost revenue. If I had $1.9 million in revenue, I would be saying to you that we're keeping all our programs that we currently have, and we're adding armed guards, and we're going to tweak and add a couple little details, but we'd be in good shape. So if you add all those things together, just on the revenue side, it's problematic. And then I also explained the cost side, and this is not unique to Sayville. These are struggles that districts are having around us as well. I can't point to, and if someone can, a spot where Sayville should have done something differently or could have done something differently. We have healthy reserves. We want to maintain those healthy reserves. There are districts that don't have healthy reserves. I don't want to use reserves every year. Like we could fix the problem with reserves, but then we would dig a hole for ourselves next year. So we have to be, so what can we do? To the point of Desmond and what you asked is reduce our expenses as much as possible this year, and then make sure we have a healthy fund balance going into 22, 20, 25, 26, and then be very careful about what we spend next year. And then what I'm anticipating is that the damage of revenue loss that we are seeing has been done. The UPK flipping, the Bristol can't get much more tax reduction than I think they've gotten.
And hopefully
I mean,
they'll go on the tax roll.
and the health insurance hit is over with. And that happened 6 years ago. That decision was made to use the health insurance to bring, and on its own, it's fixable. But when you add all those 6 factors together, it's a revenue situation that is very challenging. And then at the same time, it happened to be the year the bus contract was up. So like you have a couple of things happening at the same time.
So without like holding you to this word, it's like an anomaly, is what you're saying?
Well, I think
Like a
it's-
perfect storm.
I think we've had
of-
two years in a row that were pretty tough, and I think next year is going to be pretty tough as well. I think next year will be much better if the revenues are typical and we don't get any surprise revenue decreases. If we get a typical 2% state aid increase, that's $400,000, and we don't get a Bristol hit. We don't have to worry about the appropriated fund balance $400,000 hit. We don't have to worry about the revenue of special ed students going down 350,000 because that line is gone now.
Yeah.
So all of those hits that we're feeling, they can't happen again, and they won't happen again because they don't exist after this year.
And-
So unless they reduce state aid in an election year. So-
Right.
I would
Right.
also say we could probably, if we were not mindful, we could solve this problem with reserves, right?
Right.
But that would hurt us so severely in the coming years. That's
Mhm.
why we really have to look at it now to protect the future going forward. And it's also like you're saying, why is this happening? It's also from the COVID funding that we had. That was an extra cushion for school districts for the last couple of years. But that money has.
I would also add the
But
retirement.
those are all things that
Yeah.
you
Right.
plan on.
And
you
we
know
knew-
that that's drying up.
And we knew the retirement incentive would help us through last year, but would be an issue for us this year. I said that to you when you guys were considering it. I said, the one thing I want to say about a retirement incentive is if you offer it, you're going to get more retirements that will help us through this year. And I did say that it would affect the amount of savings you would have next year. When you have a steady retirement of 8 teachers a year, that's like $400,000 in savings every year. The other thing that we're doing next year, if we get those solar panels online, that's a $475,000 savings. We've been very thoughtful about putting the roof on and then now putting the panels on. Additionally, the payments for the panels won't kick into the following year. So we'll have a whole year where we get a reduction in, what do we call that, Rhonda? Performance contract costs?
Yeah, it might not be a full year because it's contingent on when we actually go online.
Right.
But there will be a period of time where perhaps we're receiving the reduction in our energy costs, and we don't start making debt service payments on that energy performance contract.
But I want to say, so I can't promise you ever that anything's going to be perfect.
Yeah, right.
But I
obviously.
can tell you that the factors that are affecting this year's budget will not be in play next year.
Okay.
And there will be some things in our favor, and we will get more retirements because the natural curve will kick back in because we made it an unnatural curve through the retirement incentive last year. So again, Sayville is strong financially. Our reserves are healthy. This is a tough year because of the situation related to the revenue loss. At the same exact time, things like the bus contract and other things came up. It's
What-
just a stinky situation. We have to get through it, and then we will, and we'll move forward.
Okay, wait a second, wait 1 second. First of all, the most important
You were very
thing-
patient, by the way.
Yes,
saw-
I tried to be patient. One of the most important things that we have is reserves. We have to maintain our reserves. Secondly, this is not an anomaly. This has happened other times. But what we have to look at are our spending, where we spend it, the most appropriate way, where our costs are too high, where we can keep them down.
Yeah, that was more or less what I was
all of-
asking.
That's all, that's
Spending.
basically a
Yeah.
budget that you would do always. And it's very important that we do that so we can maintain the programs for our students.
Yeah, I made an analogy in the beginning about the person who makes $100,000 a year and their salary is frozen and their
Right.
costs go up. There's only one way to solve that: spend less.
Program, and we have to move forward with our programs
Or make more.
for our students.
Right, but we
And
can't
we
make
have to
more.
figure out how we can make more.
Well,
And do
you
more.
can
You can.
make more.
can.
I mean, there
Definitely
are
can.
like if you increase. I know we're talking about programs, but if you do increase programs that attract students, then
Yeah.
you charge tuition. I
Sure.
know we lost tuition because,
Yes.
like you said, those schools. Those other
Mhm.
schools were saying, "Why are we paying Sayville? We're just going to build this program in our own district and save the money." So you can make more.
And there
Yeah.
are other ways to make.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
We have to look at the whole picture.
Yeah.
That's very
Yeah,
important.
so as an example, we spoke with Eastern Suffolk BOSIS today. They're looking for spaces and they want to rent out spaces and put students in their programs in spaces in our building. If we were to do that, I said, well, what would it look like? And if you gave them 3 classrooms and they had their students coming to our district, we would I think it was about like $25,000. So the question is it worth
Is
it
it worth
to
it?
take
Right.
that? If it was 100,000, you
Different
say,
story.
hey, different
Yeah.
story. But so again, it's different than when we rent the building here and we get $600,000. That's a huge rental property compared to 3 classrooms or 2 classrooms.
Is it 25,000 a class?
No, it's for the whole
For 3
the
classes?
3. Yeah.
I mean, I just want to say something very simple. In situations like this, kind of, to Kathy's point, we have a reputation for financial stability because we don't go into our reserves. And, when encountering something like this, we could look at cutting or we could look at reserves. I'm just glad there's total consensus that we need to cut because that's how you maintain stability I think we need the financial independence in terms of borrowing that you get from your reserves. I'm not happy about this. It's difficult to make a budget and the way the state has been operating the last 2 or 3 years. And I think at the root of it, I just wish that the state was more predictable. Because, we're talking about cutting positions and then lo and behold, let's say they come forward with the money and then like we passed on certain positions or maybe we're giving people notices that they weren't going to be coming back. That we find that we have the funds, but we could have lost a candidate. I wish the state did not operate this way. So I think I encourage people to contact Assemblyman, contact your senator. There should be some stability that's supposed to be after this, but I don't know. Albany's not very reassuring to me.
Well,
I
that's
want to say,
yeah.
I just want to interject. I forgot to with something. I press that one and go on. It doesn't like me. I just want to say that another serious fear, if they shut down the federal education department, that means our state will get less funding or no funding, and some of our programs for our special ed students and our most needy students are going to go by the wayside. That is very frightening to me. And we have to call and mention that. If you've read up on it, it's very,
when we
It's
spoke
not a good
when
thing.
we spoke to the assemblymen in the assembly and in the Senate from the New York State Senate, their
They said
feeling
it,
was that if they did abolish the Department of Education, it doesn't mean they would abolish funding. They might give it to another department to manage
Correct.
or
Yeah.
something like that. So
Okay.
I know that we got to watch that, but I think that we have to
I
also
don't trust
caution.
that.
I'm just saying that that's what the governmental officials told us. So
I also want to say in a district like Sayville, Department of Education federal level funding is not where a good amount of our funds come from.
No, it
Still
goes
a
to the
certain amount,
state.
We certainly get some. I would say that the idea of school choice and diverting public school funds to private or charter schools is scarier, much scarier. There are districts right now who are paying more to charter schools than they're collecting in taxes, and that's very, very scary. I think that's something we definitely need to keep our
But
hands on.
Sorry.
I also just want to say, and Tom mentioned it like briefly, but something I wanted to jump on is that, Desmond talked about how do we wind up in this situation? And this is a typical state move where if you look at where some of our biggest expenditures are and our increases are, they are mandates that have been put on us, right? So
Unfunded,
we
yeah.
have, this 2% cap that has been following us through the years, and we do our best to live within it. But at the same time, they gave with one hand in foundation aid, but they took it someplace else. And then when you look at why our transportation is going up at over 20%, it's this mandate of the zero emission buses, which the state hasn't given us any relief on and hasn't given those companies any relief on. The cost of healthcare is still, out of control. We're really lucky this year that it stayed stable, but that probably is not going to stay like that very long. And the fact that inflation is going up those are all things that we have to continue to let our legislators know that we are well aware that they're just playing a shell game with us. And that is why we're in the situation we are. And unfortunately, the only thing that happens is they keep decreasing the percentage we get of state aid and then pushing it over to the taxpayer. And, we've made some really good decisions. And in just the last couple of months, we decided to give a break to our firemen and in our volunteers. We've decided to, look at what we could do for our senior citizens. But all of that relief, although very well warranted, is going to be spread across all the taxpayers in this town. And we haven't even looked at, the fact that we have to cut more. And Dr. Ferris, I don't want to disagree with you, but what you have to stop saying that the things that we are going to cut don't have an effect on children. Of course they do. An increase on class size has an effect on children. It may still be a reasonable class size, but it still has an effect. The loss of an elementary administrator, we talk about mental health and we talk about keeping our children safe, and the eyes and ears of an administrator are important because they get to see things in a bird's eye view that they don't get to see in the classroom, and they get to manage the things that the teachers can't manage in a classroom. Talking about moving equipment, tech equipment, and the things that teachers use to perfect their craft are absolutely going to affect our students. So just where we are right now definitely has an effect. It may be a scalpel and not an axe, but it still has an effect. And as we start to talk about more cuts, it really is very scary. I'm very sick to my stomach that we have some really bad and big decisions that we have to make coming forward.
So let me clarify. I didn't mean to imply, nor do I think I implied that there were no effect on the kids. We're trying to make cuts that have the least greatest impact.
I understand. I
That's-
just,
so that-
I don't,
wanna
I don't, I
clarify.
just don't, yes, it's like a spoonful of sugar, but,
I didn't,
but it is.
I never said,
Yeah.
But wait, I find it very offensive because if you've seen Scott with kids, like,
and what did I say? It was the one on the list that made me the most sick, right? I said that too.
that's
So-
hurtful.
I don't think that's, sorry, I didn't mean that to be an attack. I meant that to just say that all the things that we are faced with having to do right now are just, they hurt. They hurt. I think that they might need to be done, but it's very sad that we have to do them.
Correct. And I feel the same way.
Unfortunately, I mean, these are hard decisions, and financially we have to, protect the future as well. That's the difficulty of these decisions.
I have another question. I'm sorry. I know people want to get up and speak, but pre-K, okay? Is there a max that what is our class size? Is there a maximum
Yeah,
class
so it's the
size?
state regulation. Pre-K
Okay.
can be no larger than 18, and it must have a teacher and an aide.
So it has a teacher and an aide, and it's maxed out at 18. And every year do we max out at that, right?
Well, it depends. So in last year and this year, we had 8 sections. The year before that, we had 6 sections.
Yep.
And we have a lottery every year. So this year was the first year, I think, that every family that applied got in.
Okay.
But in past years, we've had less sections and students have not gotten in. Now, the aid has been increased each year, so that's why we were able to increase sections. But for every section of pre-K, if we were to reduce a section, we would save money, let's say on the teacher's salary and the aide salary, but we would lose $97,000 of aid for the 18.
Yeah, make no mistake about it. I'm not thinking that way.
Yeah,
I'm thinking the other way.
yeah.
So my question then would be, if there were spots in our UPK, our pre-K, because Sayville does their own in-house pre-K, which I think is ridiculously beneficial in the long run for our students. Would you then be able to, for lack of a better term, sell those seats to kids in surrounding districts where they could then pay us to have their, instead of sending them to like a nursery school or a local preschool, they can come to full, our pre-K program,
So we would,
which
right.
has to be one of the
So
better.
currently, if
in
we
the
run
area.
8 programs, we have 134, and I believe we have 144 or 146 students that applied to be in it.
Okay,
So
that was my question.
So we don't have like, we've maxed out at 18. We've
That's
never
that
had,
was my question.
even like, so for example, as Ms. Messerell said, we had aid for 136.
138 times
Right. But
5,400.
we had a couple seats left. We weren't going to leave them empty, so we let the kids in because it didn't cost us anything. But we didn't get aid for those last 5 kids.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But basically, there's no scenario that I can imagine, unless we ran 10 sections or something, or 9, where we would have extra seats in that program for people
Okay.
to come to.
All right.
Good idea.
I mean,
No, if we had like a section of 10 and then we had 8 seats left, I would have to look into legal and see what we could do.
yeah, right. I think that's it for me. Sorry.
So that concludes.
Yeah,
that
I
part.
just want to thank you for your time.
Okay. So now I'll just go on to board discussion. We have upcoming training opportunities at the Islip Town School Boards. It's having a meeting on March 18th at 6:30 PM in West Islip High School. Nassau Suffolk School Boards has the 60 days of disconnect. That's March 20th, 6 to 7:30 PM. It's an online webinar. NISBA has a parliamentarian procedure webinar on March 26th at 12. And they also have a seminar on welcoming and supporting student leadership to your school board. It's a webinar on April 23rd. That's also at 12 o'clock in the afternoon.
And
Regarding those trainings, they are taped, aren't they? Or
so I was just gonna, she just sent an email
Yeah.
asking.
so if you can make it to them, then you can watch them.
They're terrible. I would want to attend the leadership one, but it's at 12 o'clock in the middle of the day on a Wednesday. Like I don't.
I mean, they do have some in the evening, I know, but yeah. Yeah. We have okay. Any other thing on the training?
Not the training, but I just want to add on to that, the 60 days of disconnect. I'm assuming that's like disconnect from your technology. Is that what that is?
Yeah.
So I just want to talk briefly that I was at the Disconnect conference. It was held by NICET. It was a replica of one that I spoke about a couple of months ago up in Albany. And I was glad to see that there were some administrators here and some teachers from the middle school and high school at that event as well. And I just want to talk about it because the state, the governor is going to pass most likely a law that talks about banning school, cell phones in schools to make your students disconnect. And there was just really good information from there and some statistics that I thought were interesting. First of all, they're expecting by the end of this legislative session for 25 of the 50 states to have cell phone bans in schools in place. And what I thought was really interesting is that right now, North Carolina and Arkansas have among the strictest bans, stricter than even California's ban. And California's legislation is going back supposedly to the table to replicate the bans that are there. The other thing that I thought was interesting, the people who were there at the panel, there were a pediatrician from the American Pediatrics Association, there were guidance counselors, there were social workers, there were parents, there were students, there were administrators, and they all got to speak about what their experience was. And there was 2 school districts that they were highlighted. One was Schoharie, which is in upstate New York. It's a suburb of Albany or Schenectady. And the other one is Sag Harbor, which is, a little district out east. But both of them have put in the cell phone bans. And there were just some things that were said. The counselors and the person from the American Pediatric Association, I didn't catch her name, said that 1 in 3 students is showing mental health issues that are either uncovered or exacerbated by the use of cell phones and social media. 1 in 3. Like, we are right now putting that like in our kids' hands every day, and it's happening younger and younger. And when you think about that, to me, that was just mind blowing. They said the increase in anxiety, the increase of depression, and that the biggest effect the statistics show are on teenage girls. And as a mother of girls, that hit hard. And not only did it increase their levels of anxiety and depression, but the attempts and actual suicides in teenage girls since the implementation of or the introduction of the iPhone has gone up exponentially. So the schools talked about how and I think Sayville's taken some really good strides towards what the goal is, but the putting your phone away all day was really, really effective. And they talked about all the things that benefited it and how, and some of the students were really good. One of the girls who spoke was a junior, and she had come from another school where there was really no cell phone rules. She said they could basically do whatever they wanted. And when she got to Schoharie and her parents like, you're going to go to the school, and now they have the cell phone ban, and she was like, over my dead body. She was there. And basically, what she said was that when she was in a school where they could be on her cell phone, she would walk around with her iPads, her iPhone, her earbuds, whatever they're called, so that she didn't have to talk to anybody, or she would literally pretend she'd have notes open on her phone to pretend she was looking at someone. She didn't have to interact with them. And that when she was looking to, oh my God, I have to put my jacket away. She said it felt like a jacket. And she said by day 3, like she was a totally different person, and it opened her eyes. And then they talked about how the increase in extracurricular increased, kids were more engaged, test scores went up, bullying went down, fighting went down. There were some funny things. The increase in the request to be removed from study hall went up because they couldn't sit there on their phone. It was very boring. They took more classes. They wanted more classes. The number of kids that attended or had to go to detention went down, because to sit there for 2 hours and stare at the wall was not like sitting there on your phone. There were just so many things, the bullying, the anxiety, the level of engagement. So I think it's coming. I do see that, I know Dr. Ferris didn't have time to do his around the district tonight, but I do know that we just had 2 students in the high school do a great research project on this. And I would really, Mrs. Macris isn't here, so she's gonna kill me because I'm gonna volunteer it. But I think in like our parent university or our parent, we really should do a forum here, include those kids and their research, and even perhaps bring in some of the schools that have started to implement even past what we have done, because it was really eye-opening. And that 1 in 3 statistic is going to stay with me for a very long time until we can undo it. So I just wanted to share that. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry it took so long.
Okay, next thing we want to talk about is next year's board meeting dates. As we discussed earlier, years ago, we had the process that the board meeting dates were on the first 2 weeks of every month. And then you had basically 3 weeks until to the next meeting. In the last 2 years, we moved to splitting those board meetings up. So they were, there was 2 weeks basically in between each meeting. My personal experience was I would like to try to go back maybe to the consolidated method because it gives a real break between the meetings instead of the cycle of every 2 weeks, having a meeting. And I think it would also might be beneficial for the administration as well because preparing for the meetings, every 2 weeks would has an impact. I don't know what your thoughts on that are.
I think going back to similar to what we did,
Mhm.
you have a week that's business and a week that's a workshop.
Mhm.
And it was truly a business meeting and a workshop meeting where we discussed what was going on. We'd get it at the business meeting. We'd discuss it at the workshop meeting. So this way, and in those couple of weeks between, you would get information from the community or the teachers I liked it better that way personally, but that's my personal feeling.
Anybody else?
I know.
Yeah.
I only experienced it one year, eat both ways. I will say that I did prefer the first 2 weeks of every month. It was just easier for scheduling. It was easier just to kind of know. It was more predictable. So I would not be against going back. I would be open to the idea that if there are months that perhaps, education in the school year is kind of cyclical. So if there are months that it makes sense, to add a meeting in a spot that isn't one of the first 2 weeks, I would be open to that. But I do agree, the idea of the business model and the workshop model, and having that breather in between just to gather information, to think, to gather your thoughts, do some research. I feel like we're on a constant hamster wheel. And I know, although this job is very, very important, it still is a volunteer position, and it is really difficult to keep up when it's constant.
I would add, just as far as, if we did do the consolidated meetings, which I am in favor of, I like that better when I first started. I know Dr. Ferris will make the point that if something needs to be done quicker or before that time where we meet again, I think we would just, if we did go with consolidated, we would have to agree, I guess, then to be available for a special meeting if need be.
That's exactly the way it was. Exactly.
There's no problem with that from our end. The only thing I would request is that we have an end of July meeting and an end of August for the hiring purposes. Sometimes we're hiring aides,
That was
monitors,
next to-
nurses.
That was next on
So
my
I
agenda.
just need an end of July meeting and then an end of August meeting so that we can, like, at the last minute, sometimes people resign and we have to hire, and we just need a meeting to appoint them.
Okay, so I won't raise that issue then.
You want to have a no July meeting? How about, I mean, we could have none, but just have a date set aside just in case. And if we're not hiring, then we could just not have the meeting.
No, I mean, no, I'm joking actually, but yeah, I mean, even in the summer, because really we have 3 meetings in the summer. We have one in the beginning of July, the end of July, and in August. But they're all needed for those reasons. One, we have to reorganize at the beginning of July. That's a
Then we
mandatory
have to
meeting.
hire.
Yeah.
Is there a reason why we're meeting on July 2nd instead of the 1st?
We can, that's flexible. We can,
You can do, what day would you like to?
Well, Christine, don't you always go away for 4th of July?
yeah, so we could do we could do the first if you want.
The first would be better.
Okay.
Okay.
And then the other question I have is for May, because in May we have actually 3 meetings, because you have the vote and you have 2 meetings.
You can eliminate that middle meeting.
That's why we could maybe make that an optional meeting. or
Sorry,
something.
Rhonda, go ahead.
We have a budget hearing and then we have the budget vote.
Okay, but what about the one on the 7th?
So
The-
is that the
first one?
I
consolidated?
think you can skip the 7th, but you have to have the other 2.
So you can discuss that.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's the only other area I see.
Ms. Vaquera and I will set that up.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And if we decide we don't like it, we can switch back. Okay. The next item is the claims audit report. Any discussion on that? Okay. So now, any other discussion items? Okay. So the next item is public comment for agenda items that are going to be voted on tonight. Do you have anybody who wants to make a comment on that?
So I saw for 7.17, there was a
okay.
decrease. Are
Sorry.
we up to that? Am I jumping?
This is
Okay.
public. No problem. Okay, great. So let's move on to agenda items. Let's see. I need a motion for recommended action minutes 601 through recommended actions finance 717.
Motion.
Okay, that's James and Christine. Discussion?
Yeah, so for 7.17, I saw a decrease of $5,000 for something with roofing, so that was a positive. So I was curious what that was about.
I'm not sure specifically, but I can get that information
It's
from you.
just
There
great.
are change orders. We do have contingencies in each of the bonded projects. So sometimes they don't, they just reduce that and then that's the contract that we pay on.
Okay.
But I can get you additional
great.
information on that.
We need more of that.
Yeah. Okay. I just had a question with the health and welfare service agreement. Now, is this something new or is this something that we had? Because I just seen so many of them at once.
I think what the issue is, we need to verify attendance with different school districts, but where our students are attending parochial schools or private schools in other districts, we are then billed for the healthcare services for those students. So we send bills, we receive bills. So
Okay.
it's all just come at once, I believe.
Okay, good.
I have a question on the 715, the Brookhaven Town. We don't pay to use those fields, do we? It's just a waiver. That's just a waiver, or or does the town of Brookhaven charge us to use those fields?
So it's just a waiver. They want to make sure that we have an agreement that we know that we're on their fields, and they also ask for insurance information.
Yeah.
So I've had 2 requests from our athletic director, Dr. Cox,
Mhm.
for both the town of Islip and the town of Brookhaven.
Okay, that was going to be my next question. Thanks.
And the other question I had with the busing contract, that contract gives us the flexibility to be able to reduce costs.
Yeah, if we have less riders, we can ask for less buses, but the cost of each bus is locked.
Locked.
Yeah, the other thing is, not only is it savings for us, but if we don't need the bus, it also frees up Suffolk Transportation Services for other routes that they may need.
Mhm.
So, if we know that we're not in need of as many buses, they plan accordingly.
Okay.
And also one more for the bid award notification from Sachem. What, can you explain that?
Is that the piggyback?
Yeah.
So we are piggybacking. That means that we're asking to join in on their cooperative bid. And we can't just do that. So we can join cooperative bids with BOCES, we can go with Suffolk County. But when there's a bid specific to that, and that came from Buildings and Grounds, the request. So we derive just other options for, lower prices for.
It's that's part of the remember what do they call that? No, the program that the state was
Regionalization.
We already do
Yeah,
that. That's
It's an example of what we already do
Yeah.
that they were suggesting we should do.
yes,
Excellent.
that's
Yeah, I think Long Island has been doing more of that than upstate.
okay. So any other discussion? All those in favor? Against? Motion passes. Then I need a motion for item new business personnel 801 through new business other 901. Christine Kelly, discussion? All those in favor? Against? Motion passes. Okay. Upcoming dates, we have March 19th, the high school musical, Something Rotten, the senior show and dinner at 3:30. And then we have on March 20th, 21st, and 22nd, the same musical at 7 p.m. And just let Julie know if you want to go to that. We also have on March 25th, the Harlem Wizards versus Sayville staff at the high school gym, which is always a good night.
Yep.
And on March 26th, the all-district band night at the middle school at 7 p.m. And on March 27th, the Board of Education meeting at 7:30. Okay. So now we have our second public comment period for any comments from the public. Go ahead. Sure.
Late night, guys. Okay, I actually wrote down some questions tonight while we were doing this presentation. I don't know any of what this budget stuff is all about, but I do have just a few questions. Desmond kind of stole one of my questions with regards to the monopoly on the bus company and shopping around. I am happy here that we can change the amount of buses
Yeah.
that we need. Would the mini buses save money if they're only carrying?
Now we can hear you.
Now you can hear me, yeah. If they're only carrying, let's say, a quarter of the students, like, is that something that we have looked into?
Yeah, so last week I had a meeting with Ms. Messerol and the Director of Transportation, and we looked at all the mini buses in the district. They can hold up to 10 students, and then we have medical buses that are special education buses that
Right.
hold 1 or 2.
Okay,
So we looked at, like, if there's 2 buses with 4 kids going to the same building, like Sunrise Drive,
Mhm.
let's reduce it to 1 bus and then have 1 bus go. So I do believe we reduced in that meeting about $150,000 of transportation cost,
okay,
because we were looking to do more, but also we're waiting for the addresses of the incoming kindergarten to lock in, so we know where some of those students are going, and we're going to continue to have those meetings. But yeah, we have more cost in small buses than we actually have in the large
regular
buses.
size.
And we have a number of reasons why kids are being bused across to different schools. We also are required to pay for anyone who applies for parochial schools. So
Right,
we have a number of small buses going to Catholic schools and or special private schools.
sure,
And so that's, and what we do there, to the point of regionalization, is oftentimes if we have, if there's a kid from Bayport, our school, from Oakdale, from another school going to like St. Anthony's, we pay a percentage and we share the bus
Mhm.
to that location.
okay.
So we're looking at every single bus route and every single small van,
Mhm.
medical van, and large van. The large buses cost about $180,000. The 10-person vans are about $90,000.
And did I understand correctly that you plan to now poll the community to see who is in fact using the buses?
Yes.
Because, for example, my kids are entitled, I drive them.
Right. So what we're going to do is send out an email tomorrow, and the email is
I know,
basically going to
Desmond.
say, we are looking to save funds for the district and to help bring our funding to a place that we can get up to the cap.
Great.
That there are many families who don't use the buses who qualify. If you are a family who qualifies, please click here. And on the click here, there's going to be a form. What's your name? How many children do you have? And would you be willing to waive the bus for 1 year? And if you click yes, we go on a list, and then we're going to confirm with those people.
Mhm.
And once we do that, even if we got 50 people out of the 2,000 that take a bus, that's $180,000.
Great.
So we're hoping we get 200 people.
Okay,
Just 2 clarifications. One, we have we don't know who of our students may be requiring a separate bus for a parochial school till April 1. Residents have up to April 1 to make
so
that
that
decision.
could be adjusted in the budget that you all would have to adopt
So,
after we find out
Yeah,
about that
we don't know
400,000?
what that information is. And then there's also, if someone would to move into the district, they have to let us know within 30 days. After April 1, it's cut
They're
off.
on their own.
Yeah.
Great.
And the large buses are
Oh,
126.
sorry.
That's okay. We also poll from time to time the drivers,
Mhm.
and we find out how many students are riding your buses.
Right.
And sometimes there's more in the morning than the afternoon for sports or things, or sometimes parents drive the students in, but then they take the bus home in the afternoon. So,
The other thing I wanted to add, some recommendations were, could we look at the late buses? Because the late buses also have less kids.
Right.
But when we pay for a bus, we pay for the bus for the day.
Right.
So there's a block of time. So whether you make 20 runs in that time or 2 runs in that time, you get them for that time. So we wouldn't, like if we said we don't want the late bus, it's still the same price.
Sure.
So we might as well keep the late bus.
But that will all be updated prior to the budget actually being
That's what we're
presented to
talking
all of you.
about.
So
And
that
that's why
could
we're-
potentially help us.
And that's why we're postponing our final presentation, because we want to have all that information before we make a decision.
Perfect. My second question was, you talked about nearly a 15% increase in the insurance that you carry.
I think it was larger, right?
it's actually 28%.
28%.
Yes,
Sorry,
and
I wrote it
that's,
down wrong.
Unallocated for our liability. It's all of auto insurance, all of our,
And I
umbrella
assume that
insurance.
that's been shopped. Or are you just staying with what's comfortable?
So it's a little more difficult than just that. There's a lengthy application that I have applied for. However, I've come to learn that if you leave nicer,
Mhm.
which is predominantly what most school districts do. They will never allow you back. It's a little sticky situation.
That seems
It's
like
not
another
as
monopoly. I'm just
easy.
saying,
Well,
sorry.
Yeah.
I run a business. I shop my insurance for myself and my employees year after year to save money. And that seems irresponsible to just do something because it's comfortable and they're not going to let you
Yeah.
back. There are other alternatives. We should be looking into them.
Yeah.
Before
and
we're
there-
cutting teachers and administrators, we should be looking into that.
And there are other options, and we can also go through the policy. And because I've seen it happen to people who recently did this, and they say, yeah, we can't beat their rates.
But we should still be looking into it.
We do.
Regardless if they say they can't, let them give you a proposal, no? I mean, seems common sense to me.
Did you, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't you do that last year? Didn't you find us a different rate for some type of insurance that was lower? And you
So,
ended up saving us money?
There are a number of different policies, and they come at different times. But I believe my predecessor went through the process, and you remained with NYSER.
Oh, I thought.
There was another thing that you're talking about where she looked at different bond rates and she was looking for bond ratings and then she changed the bond.
Oh, so
To-
yeah, I've
and
done
that saved
RFPs
us
for
several
financial
$100,000.
advisors and
Okay.
and
All right.
bond
I knew there was something where
counsel
you had
and-
made a switch from what we were doing.
Yes, and
And-
that did save us some.
Yeah.
money.
Okay, yeah. All right.
But there's nothing we're not going to look into. I mean, obviously, Amanda, that's, common sense.
Okay. I'd like to rewind to when we were talking about the money that was given to us during COVID for the unemployment insurance. Last year, you said that we pulled 700,000 out, the board 600,000. They approved it. That was reallocated to the regular budget. Am I understanding that correctly?
It was used in the 24-25.
Okay. This year, you're asking for 700,000, which would bring that reserve back to where it would be. Okay. So it's already allocated into the things that you already explained. That's what my question was. The collapsing of 4 elementary sections is alarming to me. As you know, I'm the PTA president of an elementary school of Lincoln. Collapsing 4 elementary sections, while I understand the need because of numbers being low, what happens to those 4 teachers?
Okay, so the teachers that are part of this are not teachers that they're leave replacement teachers. They're not part of the probationary faculty. The 4 sections have 14, 15, and 14, 16, 15, and 15. So the class sizes would be, in some cases, 22 and 23, and in some cases, 24. No class over 25, which is a typical class size for a second grade and first grade class next year. So I understand the concern. As of right now, there have been no cuts to staff that we intend to have next year.
But there's bodies attached to.
Yeah, there are people.
Yeah,
I'm not
right.
saying
Like,
there's
just
not
because it's a
people.
leave replacement doesn't. There's
But,
somebody
I mean,
attached to that.
I guess
leave,
the
right?
question is, are you suggesting that, and then the board should weigh on this, if we are running, we should run classes of 14,
Oh no, the class size
across
I
the
get.
grade
That
levels,
part I understand.
and not look financially at that?
So now we're talking about 4 individuals who are leave replacements. Why don't we bounce off of Desmond's idea of selling open spaces for UPK and utilize those 4 people for 4 sections, 3 to 4 sections of UPK? Is that not a possibility?
Well, there's a couple things with that. We're maxed out of the funding that we're getting from UPK, so anybody we added to UPK, we wouldn't get any additional funding.
Right, but you'd be
for.
selling it.
I guess the question is, how would we, how much, add
How can you
sections
plan for
and bring
that?
people into the district that are,
They would pay a tuition base just like any normal person would if they were going to X,
Yeah, but we don't
Y,
look
Z.
at-
I could look into that. I could look into that.
It could be a big revenue stream while maintaining 4 educators that we
You could also-
value.
You could also ask people if they want to pay to come to the district on any grade level, I would imagine.
Sure.
And you'd have to set a rate and someone would have to be willing to pay out of their pocket that amount.
Okay.
Is that legal?
No, there's regulations to that because
I don't know.
we went through
We'd
this.
have to look
exercise
Bill,
with
you
it
said you'd
before.
have to check
We'd have
with
to check with
legal.
legal. I didn't say
Yeah.
we could do it or not do it. I just
Right.
said we'd have to check with legal.
Okay.
Can we check it? I don't know.
And the last thing, I don't have a question about this, but as you all know, I work very closely with the administrative staff at Lincoln Avenue, and I could literally cry looking at
Me too.
Mr. Bullis.
Me too.
That gives me a pit in my stomach. The school will not operate the same without him. I speak on behalf of all 440 students in that building. This cannot happen. So figure it out, find a way, He cannot be lost in that building. He is instrumental in the day-to-day operations. It's not, oh, we're going to miss him because we love him. Sure, we love him, but he is a vital asset to the Lincoln Avenue community in more ways than I think you understand. So I implore you to figure out another solution. There has to be one. There are reserves. We're talking about a little hiccup of a reserve. If it's to save that man until our solar takes place next year, do it. That is your job. Do it.
Can I jump in here for a second?
Sure.
I think, when I look
Wait,
at,
1 second. Are you finished?
I'm done.
Thank you.
I think for me, this gets to the point of my thoughts about the state. Because I look at Lincoln and I look at what the school went through, and there was very early conversation where we met with the principals, and one of the things we're having a number of problems because we really didn't have the support in place for students with special needs. And I think there was a great deal of stability that came with, Mr. Bullis. So I think for me, the two things that are most concerning to me are those administrative positions. Lincoln, because I think he completely stabilized the school, having two administrators. I think we needed an assistant principal.
Our population is different than every other elementary.
Totally. And I think, and I also worry about the high school because I think for me, that position is, I looked at where our high school was 15 years ago and where it is now. And I think, we're kind of like on the right track. So it's particularly painful to even think about losing those two positions. And that's why my hope is ultimately at the state level, it's like, it's hard to plan, you know what I mean? When they say one thing, we developed 3 budgets last year. I think there might be a little bit more predictability this year, but I don't really trust it, and it's very frustrating because I think about what Lincoln went through and how it's been. And I also think about how far the high school's come. Those are my biggest concerns.
I just want to say that I agree with you 100% about the person as an individual and the position and the need. It's the reason why when we went through what we went through 3 years ago, where we lost the principal in March, Mr. Bullis was like the steady, and then we hired Mr. Armano, and we did backflips to figure out how to keep Mr. Bullis so we could have that duo in that building because they are a powerful group. And then even in the following year, using grant money, using any means possible to keep that intact, being very creative because we knew it was important and we care about it. And I really want to emphasize, because I feel a little sting of it. Nothing we're talking about doing, I want to do. I love all the programs, many of which I've been a part of creating, including the idea of Mr. Bullis. So, being in Lincoln, he's amazing. And if there's anything that we could possibly do, we will do it. But there is got to be a give then somewhere else. It can't just be, yes, we love this, we love this, we love this. We have to have it all because we're in a financial situation that is very challenging. So we can all say we want, I make a joke like, we'll have a budget meeting with the principals. Okay, we got to think about this. What can we? We'll all sacrifice. Okay, what? And then there's really nothing anyone wants to sacrifice, not because they're selfish, but because they care about the kids and they don't want to lose anything. So something has to give somewhere. And I do feel, even when I presented, the one area that made me the sickest was that line.
And also, I'll just add also, yes, we're talking about finances, but we also realize there's people behind these numbers. And that's why we're, trying to slow down the process so we can make the best decisions possible for Sayville.
We'll just say that Dr. Birch had mentioned writing the letters again. We had great success with that last year. Would you be willing to host another night? Or if I can host it at Lincoln, I'm happy to, and utilize my resources to gather the community from Lincoln to write letters.
Sure. What I would say is I would like to be in conversation with Alexis Week and Jared. I want to see where it's at. If they're telling me because it felt like, oh yes, everyone's on board with this, and there's no need to put your energy there, then I wouldn't want you to. If they say, yeah, it's looking kind of dicey, the governor's giving us a hard time, then I would say, yeah, let's do it. So if you would, I want you to put your energy where it can be most effective. So I would just say, let me talk to Jared and to Alexis and see what their thoughts are. And then if they're feeling really good and it's not necessary, or if it's like, no, that'll help us get it across the line, like I would communicate that to our PTA presidents, and we could definitely host anything, right? But I want to put our energy wherever it would best help us. Yeah, have
Okay,
it come up
I'll
with
take one more question, guys.
I first want to thank all of you for your service. I know what goes into doing this. My name is Christy. I am an educator in another district. I have a question for you about the insurance. I'm curious what hiring these armed guards is going to do to the cost of your insurance, because my understanding is if a school district has metal detectors or has armed security, it raises the cost to insure that district.
So we are not hiring our own armed guards. It's an outside company that comes with their insurance, and the policy is up to $10 million.
I want to also add, they don't go in the buildings unless there's a crisis. They're perimeter guards and they stay outside. So they would never go into the building unless there was a crisis. So as a result of that, when you hire an outside agency, it doesn't affect your insurance rates. If we armed our own guards and we had those armed guards in the building, that absolutely would do what you said. But
Okay.
in this case, it would not.
My second question is to have a guards in the area and not necessarily immediately there when there is a crisis. I find it wasteful to spend that kind of money to have somebody in the community and remove a principal, a monitor, programs that our kids need that are hands-on, to put somebody that might be there in time when we have a great Suffolk County Police. We have other resources that we don't need to spend that $200.
200,000.
200,000.
Yes.
My
Thank you. I
apologies.
appreciate the comment, and I'll
Thank you.
duly note.
And this is directed to you. You said when you were talking, and it kind of knocked the breath out of me, that you are more concerned about our budget going down because of the parents not voting because they're not getting the armed security guards. I think I'd be more concerned with the community not voting for the budget because of the security guards. Because Sayville, I grew up here. My parents grew up here. I raised my kids here. I don't want to be in a community that has to have armed security guard for my family.
Right.
That's not why we live in Sayville. That's not why we pay the property taxes we do, to have armed security guards for our students. We come here because of the programs. We come here because of the education that our children are getting, the resources. And you're talking about cutting resources and all these things for $200,000 of 3 guards. You're impacting the kids' hands-on impact more than you are with appeasing some parents that like the prestige or the we have guards protecting our kids. That's not going to be what Sayville is.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can I say answer? Hey, Chris.
Hi, Maureen.
I just want to say I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I believe, and I said this previously, we have a great guard system where they're not armed, they're just there checking IDs for kids to get in the buildings. And they're wonderful. I don't think we need armed guards. That's my own personal feelings.
I'm a high school teacher and I see more interaction with our kids, with the security guards that are there, that one-on-one. And when you start talking about kids, their mental health impact going from 1 to 3, that's huge. You would be better off putting that kind of, I'm going to say money toward that type of stuff than to put somebody driving around in a car. You know, our kids emotionally need that support.
I want to say that's what we have. Our kids go to our guards to be out there.
Yeah.
We have one at every school, sometimes 2. The kids
Yeah.
go over to them. They know them. They know the kids. They're great. They're great. I
And
cannot
when-
say enough good things.
And when you have the monitors there, the
Okay.
kids have that relationship with the monitors and the
Yeah,
aides.
all those relationships exist.
No.
No, I'm not saying losing guards. I said you should use those guards because
Well, let's
No,
not.
no,
they're
hold
not
on, hold
in
on
the
1 second.
building.
Please.
That you're hiring, they want to hire 3
Chris,
armed guards
excuse me?
in the community,
Excuse
but
me?
not hands-on with the kids.
I-
Sorry.
Okay.
I appreciate your comments,
You
and
don't.
Thank you.
just from my experience in talking to parents and being at PTA meetings and being at the forum and getting feedback, I think there are many parents who feel exactly the way you do.
Mhm.
And I think there are many parents who feel the opposite. And my worry was what I expressed. That's
Right, but
I understand.
I'm not sure that, the people that are not directly in the school know exactly like that you're going to hire them. And once they do find out, and it does get out into the community, that you're going to have the backlash of people not wanting their community being that way.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Did we talk about administration pay? Did that come up at all? Because I'm just wondering, like, we're going to lose a principal or an assistant principal. Is there any way there could be a pay freeze on the raises that are coming up where we could keep him? I mean, there is, you're getting the solar savings in a year or two, whatever it is. It's just a shame to lose somebody who's clearly made such a big impact on the community.
In areas
Yeah.
where contracts are like in place, we
Yeah.
cannot, but in areas where there are people who don't have contracts in place, we can certainly discuss freezes
Mhm.
and we could certainly do that.
Okay.
Will it get us across the needle? Maybe, but I would definitely explore that with any
Yeah.
carrier that we had no contracts that were already locked in.
Yeah. We definitely got to look into that, and we do got to look into the insurance thing too. I mean, because just because it's tough doesn't mean we can't do it. I own a business; I got to go through it. It
Yeah,
sucks.
no, I
Yeah.
didn't say, perhaps, I wasn't clear.
Yeah.
I've started the process. I've been in contact, spent many hours already exploring this. And I also have spoken to board members of NYSER who are colleagues of mine. And I was not aware that if you do leave NYSER, you will not be back.
Okay.
And that has other ramifications and challenges. So it clearly needs
That's kind of
to be-
crazy, though, that they could do that.
It's a
I did
bully.
not know
Yeah,
that.
that's
And I've also
Yeah, no,
spoken
that's
to,
awful.
yeah,
It's bullying.
But
Other-
Yeah, no, that's-
I mean,
that's-
also what's in, the insurance situation, it's not sustainable. I mean,
Yeah.
you see the natural disasters and stuff like that. Prices are going through the roof with insurance. And
without a doubt.
and sometimes it's very dangerous to then move to another carrier as well. And,
But I mean, we got to explore it.
No,
have
we
to.
definitely-
We do
Yeah,
have to-
we
we
got
do
to
have-
explore.
you
We
definitely
gotta-
have
we
to
gotta take
explore, you
measures.
have to
We
look
do
the
have to
best
explore,
rates.
but we can't be flippant about it because we have to understand that NYSERS is not, it is what it is. And why the threat of once you leave, you can't come back is so scary is that because they're so well established and because they're in the situation that that we didn't put them in, that they managed to get themselves into, if you move to another carrier and then you get dropped, then you're at the whim of what other carriers are around who are going to absolutely identify the fact that you've left the big game in town and now you're desperate to go back to them. It's like if you have flood insurance on your house right now and you get dropped, try searching for some new
Yeah,
flood
no, I know
insurance. So I think that sounds like, oh, that's a threat, but there is a real ramification that goes with that.
and we always have nicer claims. There's pages of them.
Yeah.
That perhaps haven't been settled, some have been paid out. So there are things that, I review with NYSER. And I'm not naive to know that they offer every 5 years a free fixed asset appraisal. It's important that we ensure both our new capital projects and also our equipment additions. But as they provide that service through another company, they get that information and then they raise your rates because you have more fixed assets. So, some of that I think is self-serving, but I have explored it and I will continue to
Yeah.
do so.
That's all you can do. And the bus company too, because that's ridiculous. I mean, I can't believe we're stuck with this company for insurance and this company for buses. I'll start a bus company.
Yeah.
Start a GoFundMe. As far as the armed guards, with her saying, sorry, not pinpointing you, but I think a lot of the people who aren't involved in the school district and are outside the school district, kids graduate and whatnot, are for it. I mean, a lot of the votes that came in were from people who had no idea what was going on. I mean, Kara walked miles to do it, and everybody was jumping right in on it. We're not losing security guards, so our kids aren't going to lose contact with their favorite security guard in the school. So I just think, I think there is a more pro community for that than against it. So,
Thank
Thank
you.
I mean, hey, I know you're saying no, but the time for you to speak was at the community forum and the other things. and you
Excuse me,
haven't been there,
direct
so-
to me.
Yeah, okay. So I feel like the community forum was the time for the people who were against it to come out and speak, and it was unanimously for it.
Well,
So-
Thank you.
I'll also add
That's
to that, just from a data point. I'm not
Mhm.
saying anyone in the grouping is right or wrong. in addition to the forum, which is a 70-30,
Mhm.
I went to PTA meetings and I just did like informal polling where it was silly. I had them close their
Yeah.
eyes and just raise their hand if they're, and at Lincoln Avenue was almost 90% of the parents in that PTA meeting.
Yeah.
At the middle school, high school, it was almost 65%.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm ballparking those
Yeah.
numbers, but so there is feelings on the other side that are just as strong,
Absolutely.
but that's
why we're
about
here.
the breakdown.
That's why we're here. So,
Thank you.
I believe the staff is about 50-50.
I know security is pretty for it, I believe.
Okay, thank you.
So-
Thank you. Okay,
Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to piggyback on what Ryan said really quick. I did walk a long time, and I spoke with dozens of people in the community, people who don't have kids in the schools anymore, people who haven't had kids in the schools for decades, who personally thanked me for going out on the street and walking and telling them what was going on, and they were more than happy to give their votes on that. In addition to that, I just had something off topic with the Bristol. Is that something, the pilot, is that something that is going to come back again and again? Is it something that we can anticipate getting even less and less from them over the years?
So do you want to answer that?
I'm not certain. However, the reductions that they received went all the way back to 2015-16, and their assessed value has been decreased for the 24-25 year and forward. So, the fact that they've gotten a very large decrease in their assessment, I think they would be hard pressed to challenge it again. I don't know, could that be done in 5 years from now? Perhaps.
Okay.
But they are no longer, quote, a pilot, but they are treated separately because there's a whole legal process before they actually come on our rolls. I know other districts have had pilots expire and it's been 7 years and they're still not on their assessments. But we would get, if they were off, even if they were not on our rolls but off of a pilot, one has nothing to do with the other. I don't know why they challenged their assessment, but I have the paperwork, and it went back each year from 2015-16 through 24-25, and the credits were given in 24-25, and that was awarded in August. And
So it shouldn't ever be like this much of a hit then, because of it was going back from that.
it was a
large
lot
chunk.
of years. I don't even,
Yeah.
maybe they were only built in 2015-16. So
Yeah.
that's as far as they could go back. So, now we're on a path, and, hopefully they don't challenge that assessment again. But
Okay.
I think they would be hard pressed because it was a big reduction.
Okay. And then just one more question. I know that we talked about shopping for the bus company, which we really can't do, and the insurance. Are we also shopping for financial advisors? Are we able to use, put the money? I know we can't use the reserve money really,
No.
but are you able to put that in something and then use the interest
Well,
from that
that's-
for something else?
that's you see the interest portion of our revenue. And
Mhm. That's from that?
wherever we can put reserves and collect interest, we do. That's allowed under law.
Do you want to talk
Okay.
about night class and just how you try to get as much from that as you can?
Yeah, so when I had come to the district almost 2 years ago, I had spoken with the treasurer and the board, and I introduced night class here, which is a pooled investment. That is where we have some of our reserve money.
Okay.
But even there, finding, even the interest rates in the last couple of months have dropped
Yeah.
a little there as well. And just to comment again, it's not that we shopped for our bus. There's a very specific process that we must follow in terms of
Yeah.
legal ads and a bid opening and providing the specifications to people and placing that in the paper. And we only had one show
Person
up.
come in.
Yes.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rhonda, just a quick question. It's the town of Islip that approves that tax
Yes.
adjustment for Bristol?
I believe so. The information was provided through the IDA. Because they're not fully on the rolls, I don't know if they both take a part in that process, but it's certainly a legal judgment, stipulation of agreement that they had approved.
Thank you. Okay. Any other comments? Good. Thank you. I appreciate all the feedback from the community. Any other comments from the board?
yeah, I just wanted to
let everybody know that Sunrise won the volleyball tournament. I know James was fired up
I
about that.
thought everybody won because it was for charity. right?
Yeah, exactly right.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Our meeting is closed. I need a motion. Yes, I need a motion to go into exec session to discuss an evaluation. Desmond, second, Kathy, discussion? All those in favor? Against? Okay, we're in exec session. Thank you. Have a good night.